Welcome to the Propreneur Podcast, where we help practice owners become better entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Dino Watt. And welcome once again to the Propreneur Podcast, everyone. Excited to have you here and grateful that you're listening in or watching in on our YouTube channel. Also grateful that you continue to spread the word about this podcast and sharing it with your friends, family, colleagues, because our goal really is to spread the best practices to help you grow your practice. Today is going to be a fun opportunity for us to listen in to hear from Amy. If you've looked at the show notes or looked at the title already, you know that my guest is Amy Demas, who is a rock star in her own right. And by the way, like if you want to talk patent stuff, which we won't because I have no idea about it, she'll rock your world on it. Over 50 patents, is that right?
56 at the last count.
Well, who's counting? 56, yeah. Holy moly. You know how many I have? None. So that's more than I have, and most people listening to this. But we are excited to have Amy on here to talk about really how to create that first impression inside of your office, which she's really become a master at. And we're just so grateful for all of you listening in. And thank you, Amy, for being here as a guest.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Dino.
Oh, it's going to be fun. So Amy and I have known each other for, probably 5 years, 6 years?
I was going to say about 5 years, I would say.
I don't know if I've told you this yet, Amy. So Amy first was the one who helped me make the switch to a Samsung Note phone. Because I saw her, we were at dinner, and I saw her whip out her phone and write a note with the pen, the stylus. And I was like, wait a minute, what is that? And she told me that. But Amy, I have sad, and it really is sad news.
Oh.
About 2 months ago, I made the switch to an iPhone.
Oh,
I know. And boy, can I tell you, I actually still have my note because it's like, it just reminds me so much of the good days when I could have an idea and go, oh, I'm just going to whip out my note and then write a note about it.
Yeah.
Basically, I was forced to move over to the iPhone because my family and my marketing team hated the way that I was shooting my videos, and you could always tell the quality difference. And so, yeah, I'm still getting used to it. There's still some things where I just get so frustrated about it. But, evolution, I guess.
Well, I took nuggets away from the dinner that we got to share that we saw that because I still carry around some of my travel tips from the times we were talking.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
3-prong plug and my clip for those curtains when you're in a hotel room.
So important, right?
Mm-hmm.
So important. Yeah. People are like, what are they talking about? Well, if you travel, you understand. You understand the plight that you go through when you travel. Well, Amy, before we get into anything, I think, and I truly believe that stories are what connects all of us, and how we do what we do, why we got into the situation that we're in, why we chose the profession we did. That connects all of us, because even though we might have different professions and ideas and definitely backgrounds, there's something that always we can relate to and have some empathy over. So I would love to start off with your story. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this world of consulting and doing what you do?
Well, it is a varied story because it is not a direct story. It wasn't somewhere where I intended to be, actually.
Yeah, you were supposed to be saluting people right now.
Exactly. So I did go to West Point. But then after I blew out knees, I ended up getting my engineering degree and mechanical engineering, and I anticipated doing that. And so I actually worked at a consulting firm where I designed pipe stress runs for petrochemical piping.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Big pipes at high temperatures, basically think braces for piping, because we did a lot of the stops and otherwise. So I always had this fascination in that space, but it wasn't on my mind. Well, during an economic downturn, they laid all those engineers off, and I ended up pregnant with my first child and ended up being a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling mom. And so wow. I thought that's what I was going to do the rest of my life, so that's what you think. So I was developing curriculum. I was assimilating curriculum to make it appropriate for...
Oh, so you were the homeschool mom who actually built curriculum. You were not the homeschool mom who just was like, so what are we going to learn today? Let's figure it out.
No. I studied and researched.
Listen, before I get any hate mail, I say this as a homeschooling dad. My wife and I homeschooled our kids for 3 years, so I get it. So I'm no haters, just the point that You went over and above. I'm calling myself out on this.
That's right. That's right. And I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And then when I became a single parent and was told I could not homeschool, then you're like, well, now what am I going to do when I grow up? But that wasn't when I got to consulting. I actually then went back, got my MBA, and ended up working for Bank of America.
Oh, wow.
Well, that provided some interesting insights when you work for, a Fortune 100 company. And
Sure.
I actually worked in the area that turned your paper checks into image checks. So going from that transition from an analog world to a digital world, and that's where I ended up getting all my patents is in that space and working on cash products. Well, I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life. But then my life coach introduced me to this Dr. Don Demas.
Speaking life coaches, they'll mess it up every time.
I know, the one time she was a matchmaker, and him being an orthodontist, time had me moving into that office, and I sat in through each of the roles. Even did the TC, which I thought I would never do because that sales was my impression. But I found out I was effective at it because of my mental approach to it, of being a mentor to the person who expressed interest anyway. I just needed to make it possible. And so I thought, that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And then 5 years ago this month, I was diagnosed with cancer and went through a horrendous recovery on that. Took me completely out. And so I didn't know what I was going to do then, but you sure have a chance to sit back and say, now what? Now that I have kind of faced death right in front of me, what am I going to do? It was at that point that actually Don encouraged me to look out into that consulting arena. Had some unique opportunities and then have been out on my own on there. But I always knew I wanted to be a consultant that empowers people, because I had a bad first experience with a consultant.
Oh, really?
I did. Back when I was told that I couldn't homeschool, I had a friend in my church who let me come into her pediatric dental office to pull charts and file charts. And they had a consultant there that came in once a year, rotated through the office, and asked me, what in the world are you doing? And I said, well, I'm pulling charts and filing charts. And she looked at me and said, well, you're kind of old to do that. And I said, oh, okay. Oh. And she asked me, what have you been doing in your life? And I said, well, I've been homeschooling my kids and being a stay-at-home mom. And she said, well, because of the choices you made in your life, you're never, ever going to make more than $9 an hour in the rest of your life.
Wow.
That was my first exposure to a consultant. And while I didn't think I would ever be a consultant, as I enter this space, I'm like, that is never the way you ever treat anybody in that consulting world. So that was my first exposure to a consultant and how I came into this consulting role.
Wow, that's crazy. The experience, the roller coaster you went through, and all the different again, experiences that you've had throughout your life have led you to this. And I would believe because of that makes you a lot more effective as a consultant, as someone who can actually go in and see not from the narrow view of this is all you've ever known. You have all this life experience and real life experience, to get to, first of all, thank you for your service. That's so important, right? That you actually went through that. And you learned a ton about discipline, organization, everything there, obviously. I don't even know how to quantify the whole pipe thing, laying, whatever that crazy stuff is, because that's a world I don't think like the linear type of the logical stuff. You can ask my wife. I'm never logical. But then the cancer, right? I was actually just listening to an interview, I think it was yesterday, on a quick drive with Kevin Hart. You know who he is? Kevin Hart's a comedian. He's a really short comedian. He was in the movie Jumanji with Dwayne.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So he recently had a car accident, broke his back, almost died, all this stuff. And he was talking about, he goes, it's a really special club. People who face death and are lucky enough through the grace of God to not die, but then realize there's a moment where you have that realization of, oh, all of this is an option,
Hmm.
right? Life is an option. My kids being with me is an option. The way that I'm doing my business, it's an option because there is another option, which is I'm not here.
So true.
So how did that experience
Mm.
strengthen you, give you perspective on what you want to do for the rest of your life?
Well, I did work several years ago with my life coach, probably 10 years ago. And she was actually the one who breathed into my life that someday you should be a consultant. And I always thought, oh, no, 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 no. I
Mm,
don't know enough in that space.
mm,
And she was the one who helped me work through a life mission statement. And
mm.
as I looked back, I could see it always bubbled up. No matter what role I filled, it bubbled up. And my personal mission statement of my life is to uncover truth and make it known for the empowerment of others. And
Wow,
it's,
that's powerful.
thank you. It's the way I homeschooled. So I was not I wasn't necessarily the fun parent or the other parent, but I always made homeschooling relevant, so they would learn life skills so that they were empowered. And so that's how I do my consulting work. Is it a lot of times doesn't have a lot of fluff and stuff, but it's the empowerment to show why we do what we do, and then give you repeatable things. So there's this process, these repeatable actions that you can do over and over again that is going to instantly improve what your performance on there. And so instead of telling somebody be better, now you have actionable tools that are
Mm.
small repeatable actions that you can do over and over again.
So powerful. As you see, I put this on my screen here for those of you watching on the YouTube channel, right? Uncover truth for the empowerment of others.
Mm-hmm. And
That's
a lot of
a,
times that uncovering of truth is a lot of times how we're actually performing,
mm,
and then teaching you how you can change it, and then actually taking you to that destination of
yeah.
implementing what you know.
Here's the thing, right? As you know, uncovering truth, is not always pretty, right?
No,
And
it's not.
it's hurtful. I'll be completely, raw here. I just had a conversation with my son yesterday about, the choices he's making, and he's, he's quit this job and now he's going to this job, and he quit this job and going to this job. And as we were talking, I just said, I'm saying this 1,000% out of love. You're 20 years old. You're allowed to screw up a lot of stuff. You got a lot of life ahead of you, hopefully, and I just want you to recognize patterns of quitting things when they get hard.
Mm,
And, he didn't take that very well. He's like, well, you're calling me a quitter. I'm like, no, I'm not calling you a quitter. I'm having you recognize that you're quitting.
mm,
And that's not going to be helpful later on in life. I'm sure you have had many moments like that in your own life where
mm-hmm.
you uncover this truth, whether that be for yourself or for your clients, that it's not easy to look at. Do you have any experience there? Any moments that you can think of where that happened for you?
I mean, I can actually think of it personally. Even this week, I had a moment, and in this shutdown period of time, a lot of us have had these unraveling moments,
Yes.
and I had one of those this week that my reaction did not fit the incident.
Mm,
And I keep reading and absorbing information, and I came across a new aha that actually that incident was, I had a triggering event.
mm,
And I couldn't explain it, but as I learned, I could find that there was probably a cause way back at West Point days where, at the time when you're at West Point in the first few weeks, it doesn't matter what you do, you're wrong. And
all right.
and and that triggering event made me feel that way.
Sure.
But now I'm aware of it, and I can actually do something about that. And you either rehearse truths or take other action steps or take a few breaths to realize, okay, this is an amygdala response as opposed to a prefrontal cortex response,
Yeah.
and try to do something about it. From a client perspective, what is really cool to see is as I mirror back what they're actually saying from recordings, they get these ahas, and
Mm,
they start saying, I never realized that. I knew what the right answer was, and I thought I was doing it, but I'm not. And so now I'm giving them that pause and tips to make it better. And then as they see that progress, they you start getting that momentum moving forward of, I
Right.
am something, I have value, I am providing a lot to the office.
Okay, a couple of things you said that I want to unravel that I think are powerful. Number one, I love that you were able to recognize it that there was we'll use for lack of a better word, a trauma or an incident from all the way back in West Point. I mean, that was what, 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah, 30 years ago this year.
30 years ago, right? Yeah. So we have that, right? So when we think back that far, it's like, oh man, come on, I got over that. It's a past 3 lives ago, right? 3 incarnations of my life.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I did an interview recently with Ben Hardy, who has a book coming out next month called Personality Isn't Permanent. And what he
Hmm.
talks about, the premise of the book is that those personality tests, that
Hmm.
they're really not scientifically based at all, right? Whether it be Briggs Myers or any of those. And he says, because what it does is it makes you believe you are something. And personality isn't as important as identity.
Hmm.
And our identity is shaped typically through the experiences in our life. And a lot of people have past trauma that they haven't gotten over that rears its ugly head. Here it is 30 years later in a
Hmm.
moment. And if you don't have the wherewithal like you had, you don't have the awareness to recognize what it is, then it can really continually come up over and over and over again. And the other thing you said that I thought was really powerful was this. I know so many people are afraid of this, but I hope that now in the new era that we're in, there's a recognition and an awakening around the powerfulness of this, which is recording your
Oh.
phone calls, recording your events. And a lot of people I know don't do it because they feel like it's about a gotcha, right? It's about like, oh, see what you're doing wrong, see you doing this. I record everything I do
Mm-hmm.
because then I can go back and I can listen to myself and I can see, did I get my point across? Where did I have ADD, so I know I go off on the rails sometimes, right? So it's like, where did I not make that point clear? Where did I not answer that question? Where was I like, it's an exercise in uncovering more about me and how I can get better. And that's what your directors of first impressions or receptionist, your TC, your doctor can do now that things are more virtual. So I love that you do that. Have you been doing this since you started your consulting work?
I have, and it is the most powerful thing that we can do. So I do it through the phone calls mostly, but
Mhm.
there are occasions people ask me to do it for a TC or a doctor or otherwise. If it's observable, I can coach to it.
That's
That's the
right.
thing. And
Yes.
and think about it. Sports teams do it. What
Yep.
about all the
All the
clips that we
time.
watch? So why
Yes.
are we not doing this? I mean, it's a recognized practice. In Toastmasters, we record ourselves because what you think you're doing and what you actually do are not always in sync with each other. And sometimes that's for the better and sometimes it's for the worse. And
Yep.
so you have this one vision of what you're doing with yourself, but what you're actually doing and the way it comes across is very different. And the one thing that I love using those recordings for, especially for the phone, is that person who's sitting in front of their computer on the phone, especially on a new patient call, and please do not take those on the computer. They more often than not think, oh, it's moving along, because they're sitting there click, 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 type, 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 type. But as soon as you take away the visual cues and you are experiencing it as the caller's experiencing it with no visual cues, which is what a recording provides you, all of a sudden you go, oh, there's a lot of dead time. Oh,
Oh,
I
I
hear
sounded.
click time.
Oh,
And
I. Oh, yeah, I love this. So what? Oh, I don't sound like I'm scripted. I've done that script. No, listen to yourself. You sound scripted.
yes,
Yep.
absolutely.
Totally. Yep.
Absolutely. And so that's how the power of those recordings, because that caller's experience, and we always have to think about their experience, not
Yes.
our experience of it's longer to take a phone call on the computer. It is less of a natural way of having a conversation. It is no, it is not of the value to the caller, and they are the ones who are going to be paying for your paycheck. So got to see it
Yeah,
from that perspective.
I absolutely agree. I actually, okay, so I'm literally in the middle of, I'm almost done. I'm probably about 90% done of writing my next broadcast email that's going out to my list. And I'll put it on Facebook too. Um, there's someone who I really admire and I like who put out a script for like, hey, just remember this is the way that you should be doing scripts. And I was like, oh, interesting. I'm not a fan of scripts. I don't believe in scripts. And the main reason is because most of the people that you hire are not trained actors who know
Yes.
how to make it not sound like a script, right?
Mhm.
And so I like templates. I like areas where we can have a lot more freedom. And if you're going to use a script, one of the things that I tell people to do is to look at the I's or we's or R's versus the you,
Mm.
right? And a lot of people don't understand how one-sided conversations are,
Mhm.
especially in an enrolling conversation, especially in a conversation where you're trying to get information. It's usually about what we want, what we
Oh,
have, what we'll do, what we
yes.
instead of what do you need? What do you have? What do you want? How can I like that is the key. So
It's so
yeah,
different. And the
right.
way I teach a new patient phone call is, yes, I have some guiding words, but
Mhm.
I talk about um, buckets of the conversation part,
Oh,
so
smart.
that we have the introduction, and we have the discovery and exploring, and then we have the appointment setting and informing, and then we have the assisting, and then we have the closing. And if you think in these buckets, oh, the caller took me there. Okay, I'm going to take care of that little aspect, and I'm going to meander back to where I need to get something else point across. And then
Nice.
you don't think, oh my goodness, I forgot something. If you think in these buckets of way, and then that person's personality can come through, as opposed to reading a list or saying, you're going to love our doctor. Well, I don't know, as opposed to so many
Right.
of them. How dare you tell me I'm going to love
Right.
it there?
You're gonna love your experience. Okay. Like
That's pretty
not loving
presumptive.
it so far, so you're not. I
On
love this idea of buckets. Like I immediately think of emotional buckets, right? Like Shannon and I talk about that a lot about filling each other's emotional buckets or our kids' emotional buckets. And the visualization that you just gave to me was, oh wait, so you're going to this bucket, make sure that bucket's filled. So at the end of that initial phone call, that person's buckets are filled, right?
exactly.
Every part of their worry, their concern, their experience has been filled. That's really a cool way of thinking about
Well,
it.
thank you. And the other thing that I also want them to think about, and while I understand your point about personalities, I still bring that into how we especially talk about that first impression.
Mhm.
Have we built something into each of those buckets that hits, the four main personality components? Because you're going to have, I mean, Dino, you and I are opposites, on the opposite ends in the personality spectrum. I'm the engineer, you've done the acting aspect.
Yeah,
You need
totally
the
different.
time to express yourself,
Yep.
and then the engineer person needs to know the details. And
Hmm.
so we got to make sure that we have an experience that's going to hit on all those. And when you hit, just like when you're talking with somebody, you see their eyes light up, you can hear that on the phone. When you
Yeah.
hear their eyes light up, oh, I'm going to dig in a little bit more there.
Yep.
And so when I train to that, I actually, of my 5 onboarding sessions, 2 of them are built specifically around that new patient call, that welcoming call. And we practice it and we role play. I only role play one-on-one
Nice.
because I'm in that place of trust. And I'll say,
Uh-huh.
okay, cut, do it again. Let's do it again. Because it's so important for them to feel fluid
Yep.
yet structured. So it's a customized experience that is a structured experience as well.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because, like you said, you need to have that game tape to listen to
Mhm.
and then go back and role playing it and say, okay, let's practice this. Let's make this part of our muscle memory
Mhm.
so that it flows easy. So that's not like, oh, now I'm doing a choreographed dance, step one, step two, step three, right? Like I'm a dancer. I love having counts of eights. That's my thing, right? When I turned to trying to play the piano, it's way difficult, more difficult because it counts of four and I want to go to eight, right? But once you get it down, you no longer are counting it in your head. It's just it's like, oh, I'm hearing the rhythm of the
Mhm.
music, just like you would hear the rhythm of the conversation.
Yeah, and one area of that is when we talk about what they're going to expect, which is someone like what I need to know. What I find is when it's unplanned, they meander. You remember the Billy in the
Yes.
Family Circus cartoons? You
Yes.
send Billy out to do something,
Out of the way.
and
Yep.
he's
All over the
all
place.
over the place.
Yep.
If now this is a big if that front desk scheduling coordinator or the director of first impression even says anything, and a lot of them don't even say anything about it, they tend to go all over.
Yep.
And instead of it being like da 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 da
Yep.
da 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 da, they're like na 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 na. It's like, they're all over the place. And
Totally.
so that's what we practice is, I want it in your words, but we got to hit these points. And so that's what we got to practice so it sounds natural.
So important. It's so important, and I just think that that idea of I call them frameworks, right? You have the framework here. I'm going for this step, 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 and I usually use like a some sort of teach, tailor, take control, everything with the T, so I know what's happening inside of that framework. And I think that really valuable one of the really valuable things you just said about like the personality thing isn't a matter of not seeing that people have personalities, but to recognizing what's their learning style, what is their way of getting information and data. That's so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can, that's why there needs to be almost a chameleon, like I call them phone ninjas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even a chameleon who can, with every person know, it can't be the same experience. And that's what I love about the recording aspect is they got to hear themselves have a different personality, a different approach, a different conversation with each and every person. And if
Mm-hmm.
not, they're failing.
Exactly. And I say communication, every one of us is different, but communication is when we make the connection point. And so when I teach and train, I talk about this. We have some personalities that are the fast moving, like those fighter jet pilots.
Yes.
And then we have some of those personalities that are the nurturing, and they're the refueling tank. Well, if we have to do a mid-air fueling, this one has to slow down, and that doesn't feel so good. And this one needs to speed up, and that doesn't feel so good, but it's necessary for the transfer of information, for the communication.
Yep.
Once we're successful in that, we can go back into our more natural ways. And so that's all what communication is. We're all different, but we have to learn how to come together to make the point in the transfer.
That's great. I love that analogy. That's awesome. I feel bad. We didn't even, we just got so into conversation. We didn't even talk about the topic of this, which hopefully everybody gets, is that we're talking about that first impression and making sure that you are creating an experience for people. And I believe that there will be a time, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, because I believe there will be a time in the near future that someone will come up with a way to where when somebody goes on people's websites, right now you can do the chat boxes where it's like you go to a website and it's like, hey, how can I help you? And it's somebody in some dank room is answering questions for you, right? But there will be a time where that will be a video where they'll say, hey, check this box if you approve for us to pop up and talk to you. And you might not see both ways, but you're at least going to see that person. And making sure that your communication when it comes to visual is so important. I know so many people talk about make sure you're smiling when you talk. That's true. Love it. Totally agree. And I bet when you hear that recording back, you'll be able to hear the times where you're not smiling. You might smile at the beginning, but it's like wanes off, right?
Oh, absolutely.
All the time.
Because our voice characteristics display what's going on here. So it's so true.
So true. Okay, so what are some of the bigger mistakes that you see when you are going into offices that aren't necessarily things that people would normally think about, like the obvious, like, well, of course, you got to have a friendly person on the other end of the phone. But what are some mistakes that you're seeing people inside their office that can make small things that can make a huge difference?
Here's one that whenever I'm either on a podcast or otherwise, it's the freebie that is so easy. And if you only do this, it will be huge. So when you start a phone call, all right, you've done your greeting and we've got our greeting down. Thank you for calling, da, 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 da. This is Amy. How may I help you? The caller tells you why they're calling. Mm-hmm. The very next thing I want you to say is to say, I would be happy to help you. I want you to put an emotion word in there. As opposed to, think about when you call your doctor's office, you're almost trained to do this. I call my doctor's office and I say, good afternoon, this is Amy and my date of birth is da, 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 da. Because the person who usually answers the phone, Dino, you'll say, I need to schedule my appointment or reschedule. Okay, what's your name? Yeah. what's your name? And that kind of
Yep.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
We are so conditioned to that to be the situation normal that we are in a zombie zone, in a numb zone.
Mm-hmm.
This is an opportunity ripe for setting an amazing first impression, to shake them out of their zone and surprise them in a positive way. So let's take this uncommon courtesy and make it common.
Mm-hmm.
So when they say, I need to do this, I would be happy to help you. May I have your name? That is huge. And then at the end of the call, I call that our first response. It's not that creative. I'm an engineer, you know? And then at the end of the call, we're going to do the same thing, a last response, which more people do. And that's, you know, have a good day, have a good weekend, and make sure you keep that voice inflection upwards, not have a good day on here.
Yes.
So here's the interesting thing, Dino, is I start coaching after we've done training. So I've already told them about that.
Okay.
Not a single person, when I listen to their first coaching, and I don't listen to any recordings until after I've taught, ever does it.
Wow.
They think they are, but they are not.
Yep.
And this is what is so important, and the reason I say it's so important. I'll use it from an example of my life. Have you ever received a gift where somebody has handed it to you in the Walmart or Target bag that they bought it in?
Yeah, I have actually, and it's so exciting.
It is. Okay, how different is that?
For taking the time.
Yeah, I know. My brother does it. It's almost his iconic way.
How much do you care about me right now?
How different is that than the person who wraps it and puts it in a bow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It could be the identical gift. Maybe even they bought you the same thing.
Yeah.
But it was the care in which you wrapped that gift.
Yeah.
And I say that first and last response, even if we changed absolutely nothing in the middle of the conversation, is you've wrapped it in politeness. And so that is something that if you have a clinical person who grabs the phone at the last minute, you know, they may not know the exact words I should say, but if everybody will put that first response, I would be happy to help you, or I can certainly help you, some kind of adverb there,
Yes.
and end the call, have a great day, or something personal, you have taken that conversation, no matter what was in the middle, and wrapped it in a bow.
No,
So
I love
that
it.
would be my one secret. And it's amazing. People know it, but they don't actually do it. If you can do that, you will elevate it. And when I told my brother-in-law, who has a child who has a lot of medical needs, and I said, I'm going to teach that, his jaw dropped, and he said, if I ever heard that out of an office, I would be floored, and I would be with them for life, because I, in all his years, have never heard an office say that.
Well, and that's really the main point, right? Is I tell people all the time, my teams, I said, look, I want to ruin you. I want to ruin you as an employee, that if you have to leave this office, that you'll always think back to this office as the bar that you're set. Well, I want you to ruin your patients as well. I want you to ruin your clients to where when they called you, they got a different experience from what they're used to. And then now they're going to have you as the bar to everything else. It's like, well, they were nice, but they weren't like Demas orthodontics, right? Like that's the experience.
Exactly. You know, and in this place where everyone's going to multiple opinions, I want to keep you in the game.
Yes.
I want them to, even if you're first, second, or third, you know, let's say you're third, when they go to the other ones, they're like, well, that was nice. And I might say yes, but if that first phone call was that good, what else is it going to be like when I get there?
100% agree. And I think people pay more for that. I think people remember that more. They want to tell their friends and family about it more. It's funny because it is common sense, but it's not always common practice.
Exactly.
I know there are probably doctors listening to this right now going like, well, of course. And, you know, that's what I tell my team all the time. And I know my girls they're amazing at this, but you don't know until you know. And most people don't know because they're not recording their calls. They're not going out and actually looking at them, and they're not doing it because they're just not putting the focus on it. And everybody knows it's common knowledge, just not common practice.
It's so true. I like to say none of this is rocket science,
right?
But it's kind of like you see books behind me. I mean, I read a lot, but how many diet books are out there? We know what we're supposed to do, but how much do we do them? And that's my special gifting, is what I would like to say, is being able to provide that feedback in a trust zone. yes, in Toastmasters, I've been an award-winning evaluator of speeches, so it really has served me well in that space. But I'm a God girl, and I just feel God has gifted me in that way of that feedback loop that helps on there and inspires them to greatness. I've had doctors say, you have saved many people their job and their career.
Wow, that's so empowering.
It is amazing. And to me, when I see light bulbs go off for people, it excites me in no other way. So, but it takes a lot of time. When I get ready to coach, I listen to an hour's worth of phone calls for every person I'm coaching.
Wow.
So I realize it would take a lot of time. But the other gift that I bring is I'm that third party person, that person who stands outside of the office shenanigans, drama, emotion, whatever you want to say.
Yep.
And you and I have talked, Dino. I'm the Aunt Amy who can come, and when I say it, somehow it comes across differently.
Totally.
And when it's said by somebody in the office, it could be the exact same words, and you may feel like, oh, why do I have to do that? Instead of being glad that there's someone who just gets it accomplished.
Yep.
Because sometimes. Totally. Dino, you're going to be the Uncle Dino for somebody that I
favorite Uncle Dino. That's right. I tell people all the time, I'm going to come and be favorite Uncle Dino. And people say it. And I had an office once down in Texas. I actually had never done any personal coaching with them. They had gone through my online course. And I was at the PCSO in Hawaii last year, and I had this whole group of girls come up like, oh my gosh, it's Dino, and whatever, and we're talking, and I'm like, I have no idea. And I'm thinking, did I forget that I went to their office? I don't recognize any of these girls whatsoever. And they're like, no, we watch all of your videos, and in our office, we have a thing, WWDD. I'm like, what's that? And they're like, what would Dino do? And I was like, oh my gosh. But that's what happens, right? When you have that outside perspective, when you can come in, like you just said, about being that person who's not in the jar they're in every single day. It's the perspective that I love people who go into offices and they know every single part of the office because they've worked it, they've been a clinician, they've done everything. That's awesome. My USP, if you will, is the fact that I'm not in that jar, that I'm looking at it purely as a business standpoint and going, okay, so that way I can say to the team members, well, business wise, let's look at this, how you have to look at this business owner. As a business owner, I can say, as a business owner, we get to look at this like a team member would look like, because I get to play all those roles. But I agree with you. I think it's so important for you to do that. When you are going in these offices and you are sharing this information with them, you mentioned that there's a couple of, like you do a coaching program first and then there's a evaluation follow-up, or how does that work?
So great question on there. So my delivery of the initial training can be remote training or it can be on-site. So wonderful. I give the options on there. On-site is a great way to have a full day, and it has team building involved and a great cohesion for the team. Whereas the on-site is shorter, it's easier to put on your calendar, more directed to those who are going to have the follow-up. That's phase one. And I call it, that's what I'm putting you tools in your toolbox. I'm just filling your toolbox with tools. After that point, I move on to phase two, and that's the coaching. So for those who are, it's the implementation phase. For those who are moving forward in coaching, usually the front desk individuals, it's 5 sessions, and they come about every 2 or 3 weeks. So it's enough time to practice and start implementing, but not so far that we lose momentum.
And have that accountability with you so they know, oh my gosh, I got to get this assignment done or get this practice in before we meet with Amy in 2 weeks.
Exactly. And I have an online academy that they get their lessons from and they can always refer back to. And then when I coach with them, it's a half-hour period of time. And then I write up follow-up notes that go to the individual, and it has their recording clips, and it also goes to the doctor. So there's a lot of great transparency in that. And if we have an individual, so I've had some offices who say, can you also coach my clinician who's on the phone on Fridays? And a lot of times I will do that across 3 sessions because they're not taking as many new patient calls, but I want them empowered, especially how to open and close calls, how to set appointments, and how to handle an upset caller. That, the 80-20 rule, it's going to cover 80% of what you're going to do on the phone. And it's enough, but not an overabundance. That's all phase 2. So you're going to see results change within 3 months.
Wow, that's great.
And then I check back in. again at month 6 and 9. And I call it a maintenance phase on their accountability. And the reason is for this. When I'm there talking with you every 2-3 weeks, it's good to have that top of mind awareness on that. But as soon as it's almost like taking the training wheels off, when I step back and it's like, okay, I'm not going to be watching over your shoulder all the time. What's going to happen now?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to sustain that? Because
That's
human
right.
old habits pull back. Or how are you going to perform after you go through a natural stress cycle? Whether that's summer, January, everybody has new insurance, somebody on maternity leave, somebody out sick, because we know stress impacts performance, and it can't help but impact it, but will you rebound if it impacted it? And so
Right.
that's what months 6 and 9 are for. What I find is at month 6, 85-90% of what we've learned will maintain. Maybe some of the last habits might have a little dip, but a gentle reminder there tends to bring it back up, as opposed to letting that natural entropy occur.
Yes.
And then you're like, well, that wasn't worth it.
Yep.
You
Totally.
know, so better to do it, check back in. And then I have some offices who say, just a couple times a year, will you check back in on there? But that is on a case-by-case basis. So we're talking a 9-month program.
That's awesome. Let me ask you a question around, and then we'll get to our rapid fire questions, is that I
Sure.
wanted to know, right now, here we are, we're recording this, not completely post-COVID, but getting there, like more and more offices are opening and there's some relief there, which is great. What would you say would be the most important area that these offices need to focus on when it comes to that first impression right now, especially with a lot of offices going virtual, a lot of offices who are experiencing for themselves a new era of business ownership?
Mm-hmm. We have to know how to ask the right questions.
Mm.
We have to, that discovery process has to be in a way that we're asking the right questions, but not sound like an interrogation.
Yes.
So it's uncovering how to have natural conversation, to pick up on some cues, to then know what the next branching question is. And so that is really using profound listening skills that we're not natural at, especially when you have the clinician saying, is so-and-so here? Is so-and-so here? And the doctor's
Right.
asking you a question.
Or
And
you're
so,
behind time and
oh
schedule's bad.
my
Yeah. Yeah.
goodness. So we need to really hone in on our listening skills and our asking of question skills. And that's going to help us know how to funnel or navigate that person in the experience that is best for them in what they want.
I couldn't agree more. I think that right now, one of the dangers is that people are so eager to get back to quote normal or to get back to their production ramping up again. That is going to be real easy to let some very important things, but things you're not always thinking about slide. Like you might be in the place where you're just going, hey man, we just want people to answer the phones. We need a warm body, let alone a ninja. And we probably don't have time to get into this too much, but we talked about before on the pre-call about how I'm a big fan of, I think this position, the director of first impressions, because they are a part of the sales team. I do a pyramid for every business, and people have probably seen that before, that there's only 2 positions in any business. It's sales and sales support. And when I usually ask about who they think who is on the sales team, you'll usually get a TC who will raise their hand, and sometimes the doctor, and hardly ever you'll get that receptionist, that director of first impressions. And I always say, no, you're the first part of sales. You're the first thing they see, hear, experience. You better be on that sales team. What do you think about pay in the sense of, like, I just think that person should be, we want to expect more output from them, so therefore we pay them more. And have you seen where people just kind of just get a warm body? Hey, do they sound good on the phone? Cool. That's a minimal job. We pay them less.
A lot of times it's thought of as an entry-level job.
There you go. Yes.
And it truly can be a career if we would treat it like that. And unfortunately, front desk individuals are usually said, well, that's how you take the phone on and off hold. Just go do it.
Right.
And they haven't been provided training. They haven't been empowered in there.
Yes.
And so you need to empower them. And There's been a few times Don has had to go in while we were shut down and answer the phones and maybe return a few phone calls. And he's like, get me out of here. Don't
Yeah.
ever put me there. But the thing he doesn't even realize, though, is doctors, you may think, how hard could that be to answer a phone call? But what you don't realize is your patients will always treat you differently than that front desk person because you have DR in front of your name.
Yep.
It is a hard job. And it is more than putting round pegs into round holes. They are multitasking all over the time, and they are on. I actually show a chart when I'm training. You doctors, you talk to, if you say X is the number of patients you see a day, let's use 100 as an example for easy math. You're probably seeing 90 to 100 of them because maybe a person comes in for a retainer check and they walk in and out of the door.
Right.
Your clinicians, depending on how many you have, are seeing probably half to maybe 20% of the people who walk in the door. Your TC in the column is maybe seeing 5-10%.
Such a good point.
Your front desk person, when they come in, when they go out, when they set an appointment and the phone calls, they are seeing 400 to 500% more than anybody else in the office. And every one of those is an impression, whether it's a first, second, or other impression. And they are shaping how people associate your practice to be. And so they need to be the highest trained individuals of the office.
That is a really excellent point. And I hope that you that are listening to this or watching it on YouTube really take that into consideration, because think about it. This is the person who's not only in charge of being the face of your business, but also the person who's in charge of your schedule. How often do you hear the clinic upset about how the front desk scheduled things and they did this wrong or that or whatever? It's like, well, let's get high skilled, high level, high appreciated people in that position so that it can make the rest of it run smooth. It's like you're trying to run a race here and you're up against all these Ferraris and you're driving a Honda. It's a good car, but it's not going to win you the race.
Exactly. And I would encourage you, empowering those people makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Even on my website, you can hear some before and afters of some of that. Even how we offer appointments. I've had, some mousy girls. They're just like, oh, please take an appointment, or, and now we've turned them into those who have a backbone. They are still the most polite people, but now they're guiding, and they are actually, I call them air traffic control. Air traffic control, a pilot would not dare tell the air traffic control, hey, I see a space in there. I'm just coming in there.
Yeah, just gonna
do it. But that's the way our front desk team did get pushed around. Yeah. And, air traffic control says, pilot, you can come in here, or you're circling around and coming back here. Which one do you want?
I love that idea. Like, think about that. And I know for some doctors or people listening, it might push a button, but think about that. If you had hired so correctly that when you tried to do something like that, where you're like, well, just push him, put him in that spot, that they turned to you because they understood the importance of their job and the coordinating and choreography that has to happen for what they do, that they would turn to you and say, like, no, I'm not putting him in there because they need to go here. No, we're not doing that, because you want someone who will direct, director of first impressions, direct the entire operation.
What's interesting, Dino, and here one time I had some office team members before I started doing this skill. We'll just put them in there. We'll squeeze them in there. And one time when I went back and looked at the metrics aspect of their arrival time and departure time, you can't cheat the choreography of the doctor. And the doctor is the linchpin in all this, because there's only one doctor for all the other team members. You cannot cheat that doctor time. And what I found is those people arrived earlier at the more convenient times, but their departure time was as if they had scheduled them correctly. But instead, they had to hang around the office for an extra 30, 40, 50 minutes because we were thinking we were doing them a favor on their arrival time, but you can't cheat to the departure time.
And how annoying is that as a patient? Like, you're sitting there, come on. Yeah, we could talk about this for hours. Yeah. Okay. I know that everybody got a ton of great value out of this conversation, and I hope you took some notes. I hope you took a lot of it to heart too, about how important it is for you to really look at how you're making that first impression when people call into you. So Amy, thank you so much
Mm.
for all of your amazing wisdom. We have gotten to the place to where we do our rapid fire 6 questions. These are a quick, you just answer them off top of your head. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to get your dissertation. I know
Yep.
you like to do a dissertation, but you can't now. I know we don't need you to fill out a patent. We didn't even talk about the 50 patents, but when we get into that, just a rapid fire. You ready to play?
Yes, go for it.
All right. What is the most expensive thing that you believe private practice owners are missing in their practice?
Most expensive thing. Good counsel.
Oh, nice. So true, right?
Mhm.
Outside perspective. So true. What is a book that every private practice owner should be reading?
The Power of Moments.
The Power of Moments. You know who that's by?
Chip and Dan Heath, the Heath brothers.
Chip and Dan Heath. Okay, we will put that in the show notes for sure.
Mhm.
In my book, The Practice RX, I focus a lot on team culture and team performance as the foundation of business growth. What do you see? You go into a lot of practices, you get that outside perspective. What do you see as the biggest challenge that private practice owners are facing with their teams and their office culture?
I think it is the communication and cohesiveness so that the experience is the same throughout and not gruff in one area and push over in another area.
That's so true, right? That through line to
Mhm.
make sure that it's all the way through. Okay, so I'm going to throw this up on the screen for people who are watching, but as people are listening, please tell everybody how they can connect with you and what are
Absolutely.
the different ways that they can reach out to you.
So as you see the email going across, I have social media across Facebook, LinkedIn, and otherwise, either through Communicate Excellence or Amy Demas. I also have a book that you can find on Amazon or other places under the same name, Communicate Excellence, which you can find lots of tips as well.
So your book is on Amazon. It's available on Amazon, both Kindle and hardcover.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is on both Kindle and
Okay.
hardcover.
Great. So Communicate Excellence is the name of the book, and then it's Amy at communicateexcellence.com for
That is
those of you that
correct.
are listening. Awesome. Very cool. Okay. Next question is, what's the best advice that you've ever received in life or in business?
Wow. Take a breath.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's true. Take a
Mhm.
breath. That's a really, you know what? That's the shortest piece of advice that we've ever got on the show, and it's probably one of the most profound. Like, even just right now, what we just went through with the COVID, right? Take a breath.
Mhm.
It's not the end of the world. It really isn't. It's not the end of your business. Wow, that's really cool. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
What's the best resource or tool that every private practice owner should be using to grow their practice?
To grow their practice. Because I can think of so many different tools. I would like us to see how we can find tools that enhance our practice management system so that we can avoid errors. And because there's so many, I'm not going to pick one, but I want to see those complementary features so that we are more systematic in the things that could break or get missed.
That's really good. I love it. Well, Amy, again, just tons of value, tons of information. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, sharing your expertise. And everyone, please reach out to Amy at communicateexcellence.com. Follow her on Facebook and on Instagram. She's very active there. Go get her book. Like, go buy a book and use it as your manual inside of your office. Like, this is so important. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dino. I really appreciate it. It was great.
Everyone, thank you for being here again for another episode of the Practice RX. That's my book. Sorry, for the Propreneur podcast. Our goal always is to help bring the best practices possible to you. And remember, if you enjoyed what you heard today, share it with a colleague or a friend to help them also learn the best practices they can. And always remember that our goal here is to help you be more proactive, productive, and profitable in all areas of your life and business. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much again for listening to the Propreneur podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do so. Also, if you feel like you might be a good fit for our podcast as a guest or know somebody who you think would be, go ahead and email us at dino@dinowatt.com. Again, thanks for support. We'll see you on the next episode.